Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whenever you happenstance into this monumental truth bomb riff. I've had a surprise opportunity for this incredible guest that we're going to really endeavor a lot of things that everybody's in search of at the moment. And right in front of you on this screen is none other than Lev Parnas. Now, interestingly enough, Lev should be pretty much a household name, but I suspect that there are millions of people who don't know who Lev Parnas is, which is shocking, all things considered. But as I was just thinking about this right before I hit record, I tried to do a search on just getting some more background because this interview, this opportunity to talk to Lev, was kind of impromptu, and I didn't have a whole lot of time to ramp up. But Lev, I got to just say off the top, man, I literally had to look for some of your information. And that to me is pretty shocking considering the kind of information you have. Have you found that you're a little bit quashed in the system? And if so, is it on your radar or is this news to you?
Oh no. First of all, thank you for having me, Patrick. But that was their plan from day one. Part of my arrest, part of what you're seeing play out right now with Todd Blanche, and we'll get into with Ghislaine Maxwell and the whole Epstein, was part of not to uncover the truth, but to shut it down, to squash it, to bury it, so change history. And that's why they arrested me. Bill Barr took me down because he wanted to save Donald Trump. He wanted to make me the scapegoat. He wanted to see what I had. And when he realized that I had, like they said, quoting the Southern District of New York, that I had abundance of evidence or from, text messages, phone calls, emails, videos, you name it, they needed to a way to squash it, bury it. And that's why, till this day, the one
You
of
know
the
why? Do you
main
know why I'm looking over my shoulder?
why
what? What? I'm like, my God, when is the like little laser beam come on the screen? Because that's a pretty incredible introduction, Lev.
Yeah, I mean, and you got to understand the other thing that nobody else realizes that I'm going to tell you right now is if you take a look at Donald Trump, right? We all know Donald Trump by now. He has no problem suing anybody, right? He just sued Rupert Murdoch for $10 billion, Wall Street Journal.
He's been
He
doing it
has
for decades.
he has no problem responding, on either Twitter, X, Truth Social, whatever platform. I mean, he'll respond to a 16-year-old Greta Vance, the girl that, the climate activist. He doesn't care. He'll go after reporters. He'll go after people that, have a certain kind of disabilities. He doesn't care. But if you really take a look, because I know you do a lot of investigative journalism, Patrick, I'm going to give you an interesting one. I'm the only person that he's never responded to. And I'm going to let you think about that. I'm the only person. The only time he's ever responded to me is the day after my arrest, when he was asked, "Do you know Lev Parnas?" And he said, "I don't know the man. He might be a fine gentleman, for all I know. But I know I've never met him. I take pictures with lots of people, and ever since then, it's been now 6 years because it's going to be 6 years in October 10th to the day of my arrest. Uh, he's literally not one time responded to me. In his first impeachment, first of all, let's start
Wait,
off
wait. Let
the
me let me
summary.
get into that because I want to build up to this just slightly, if you don't mind me interrupting
Yeah,
before.
no, go right. Yeah, go right.
So, for the viewers, I want to introduce because I got a feeling this is going to get a lot of traction. As always, please like, subscribe, and share. My name is Patrick Lovell. I'm the producer. I'm the roadmap to one of the, if not the largest criminal conspiracy and cover up in the history of the world, of which what we're talking about is part and parcel, and it'll become news to you, Lev, as we move through our relationship together on the flip side of this, which is super super cool. But I want to start with this. And by the way, we're recording on July 23rd, 2025. And my New York Times front page, right before we hit record on this, is just covered with Epstein, right? It's just covered with all things Donald Trump is going on the offensive as he promised for retribution, claiming, for example, among others, that former President Obama, which of course we know anybody who understands what the Supreme Court ruled in his favor by way of presidential immunity. Well, that goes for Obama as well. But the idea from a publicity slash perspective and perception and the psychological warfare and everything else. The first thing that Donald is doing at the moment is all things lie, deny, switch the blame, and implicate, as he always has, right? And so among those scenarios, he's talking about, well, the Obama administration is using nothing but forgeries and documentation falsification to be able to, frame me for all things Epstein. And then, of course, on the front page of the New York Times, it said that a court in Florida, and I'm not sure if it was in West Palm Beach, but had denied the grand jury initiative that Pam Bondi's Department of Justice is doing by way of trying to switch, gears and all of those methodologies. And when you were talking about, Lev, the being the only person that Donald Trump doesn't respond to, I'm in good company because a journalist that I speak to often, a guy you might be familiar with, a gentleman by the name of David K. Johnston, who has been covering Donald Trump for now decades, and who's revealed information that shows the type of crime that Donald Trump had been involved with since the 70s, quite frankly. He's in the same boat. Donald Trump will sue everybody but David K. Johnston because he's got all the goods, and it sounds like you're in that category. So as we move forward, like I said at the outset, many people recognize who you are, but millions more should know who you are. And I'm going to just call attention to the wonderful documentary that Rachel Maddow's team put together called From Russia with Lev, which I believe is available on, I saw it on NBC's website, streaming. I think
I
it's
think
on
it's on Apple, and
Amazon,
several. Yeah.
some of the others, and we'll promote that downstream. But I wanted to start by just asking you a couple of questions with that to kind of ease us into the now, right? And first, I want to say that my mother's family is from the Ukraine, by the way.
Oh,
So it's really nice to connect with you. And as I was watching, 10 months ago, that unbelievable documentary because of what it reveals about the Justice Department, ultimately, under Bill Barr, right? And any of us who have paid attention to Bill Barr going back to Contragate, it's just incredible. But we're so overwhelmed by what's happening right now with Pam Bondi, it's kind of hard to see the forest for the trees. And ironically, as I just mentioned, that also goes for, quite frankly, Eric Holder because of the 2008 great financial crisis. So I want to ask you just kind of a compounded question to start off with. Considering how much pressure that you must have been under because of the access that you had, how is it possible that you always maintain just this incredible grin, this incredible sort of, I don't know, calm in the face of pressure? I mean, is that a trait like DNA or something? Because to me, I don't think I would be able to have as much composure considering.
Since you saw my documentary, my life, I've been through a lot of things in my life, and very few things could scare me or really, shake me up. But it's not difficult when you have the truth on your side, when you have the facts on your side, and when you don't have to sit there and make things up. And typically, usually, I'm sitting in front of people that are lying, people that are trying to make things up, and I have the truth. So it's like playing cards where their cards are open and my cards are closed. So that's kind of the grin I have because I know that I keep talking, but when it's my turn to talk, I'm about to spank you. I'm about to tell you, put you in your spot because I have the facts and you don't, and I have like they used to say, Lev has the receipts. I have the receipts to bring it, because I try not to, and that's one of the reasons why all these years people try to get me into conversations with heavy political stuff, debates, policies, and certain things that happen, and I don't do that because I think I need my message to be so strong because of what I've witnessed, what I've been a part of, what that till this day is important to be able to go out there and save our democracy, that I can't, give a chance to have somebody attack me because of an opinion that I gave that could be right or wrong or could be misconstrued. And that's why I try to stick to the facts, excuse me, stick to the facts, and speak because my life, I kind of became, I speak truth to power every day. Even take a look at today, like one of the things you started talking about in the opening. I need to maybe break some of the news here on your show. Literally, as we were going right before we started taping, they some of the things that was breaking was that Donald Trump, Pam Bondi, notified Donald Trump prior to them stopping this that his name was all over the Epstein list. I reported about this on my Substack a week and a half ago, in July 6th, and that's why it's all documented. You could take a look. My sources said that that's why Trump shut it down, and not only that, it's because Elon Musk knows about it, which a name that people don't talk about, because this is how it all started with Elon triggering it by getting into the fight, saying Trump's name is on the list. He erased it. They tried to squash it. Trump already knew. They warned him, and that's why he tried to, on a July 6th, July long weekend, fourth weekend, tried to bury the story and put it out there. But he couldn't. He underestimated his mega base. That cult that he sold the Epstein file that linked everything to the deep state, to the Clintons, to the child pornography trafficking. He underestimated how deep they would go. And now, I mean, some of the things he's doing is very dangerous. For instance, the thing you said about deflect, and that's part of his
What's the
game.
blame and implicate?
That's part of Donald Trump's MO that he does, and he beautifully maneuvers and uses the media to his advantage now by also threatening and suing them, scaring them, by throwing them headliners what they're chasing for ratings. That he knows how to do. But now it's gotten a little bit serious because the Epstein situation has been lingering already for 2 weeks. It's not going away because not because of the media, but because his base, the Republicans and MAGA are keeping it alive. They're the ones that want now to have Maxwell come testify in front of Congress and do this stuff. So it's like that Streisand effect that's backfiring. The more he tries to bury it, the more. So then comes in Act Two, Tulsi Gabbard, by like you said, announcing they're going to go after Obama. Well, what I wrote about today in my Substack, literally 2 hours ago before we went on here, that my sources are telling me that this distraction has now turned into a real ploy where he's going to try to get Obama in handcuffs. He's going to now literally, I'll even quote him from what one of my sources said. I wrote in my Substack today. He said, he goes, "Those scumbags raided my house at Mar-a-Lago, tried to throw me behind bars. You wait, Obama's gonna go down for treason. You'll see who ends up in handcuffs." So
Hey, can I?
now,
Oh no, please continue. And then
yeah.
you're throwing so much incredible stuff at me. It's like there's so much I want to ask you and compartmentalize. But please continue and roll with that, and then I'll jump in.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, I just wanted to make sure that it's turning into a lot of serious stuff. And as far as his name being on there is one thing, but there's other people and other things that he's covering up for when it comes to the Epstein list.
Well, let's get a little bit of perspective here for some folks that might not know who you are, and hopefully tens of millions more will know you in short order. But look, I found your background incredibly fascinating from the standpoint that I believe you're originally from Ukraine. Your family relocated to the United States, I believe Brooklyn, as
Brooklyn.
a child, and you were raised in a Ukrainian community that was, you know,
Ex-Soviet Jewish community, because back then we were all there was no Ukraine, it was the Soviet Union
right,
back in 1974, and we all immigrated to this little enclave in Brooklyn, New York, called Brighton Beach,
right,
which we call Little Odessa, because
yep.
primarily it was a lot of people from the former Soviet Union, Jewish, persecuted, and that's why we were there. And we kind of built our own, like, they have little Chinatown, they have little Italy. This was little Odessa. This was our little town.
And I've been there, and I may have mentioned this to you before we started recording, but my mother's family is from the
Yes.
Ukraine, and my grandfather was the most special guy in my life to me. And in our family, it's like all of our families, tradition, and that came from Ukraine. And so the perspective of the question that I want to set up, to given what you just said, and other things that I've heard you, basically engage Michael Cohen, and I think his Mea Culpa, podcast is terrific. And it's funny because when I first learned about you guys, 10 years ago, I wouldn't have realized I would appreciate who you guys are so much now, all things considered, because of all
Oh,
of these
absolutely.
things that have come to fruition. But going back to this perspective of where you're from and what you're raised on, look, you knew who the Nazis were, you knew who Stalin was, you know what happens in authoritarianism, and here you are literally projecting, off the heels of what we saw in Los Angeles a couple of weeks ago with ICE, and we're seeing cops beat up protesters all over, I mean, crushing schools all over the country behind masks and so forth. Does this particularly feed your commitment to democracy, all things considered? And if so, can you kind of frame that for me?
Oh, 100%. I mean, part of why we came to the United States is because we were persecuted through communism, through authoritarianism, dictatorship, and then we came to a land of liberty, a land of free speech, a land of a place where our kids wouldn't be scared to be whatever they want, and that's what it was like for the past 40 years until now. We see Donald Trump, and not only Donald Trump, but it's the people behind him, which is extremely important that you talk about because I write about this in my Substack every single day. Because the one thing nobody's talking about, yes, we're watching how he's using ICE, is his new Gestapo, his FSB, the KGB, basically a group of people, an agency that is now loyal to him, run by Tom Homan. Tom Homan is not appointed by the Senate or the Congress. He is just basically a regular guy that the president is loyal to the president, that is running right now after the bill that he passed through, the most powerful agency, more powerful than the FBI, DOJ, and and the other CIA. That's how powerful. And now they're planning on using it. Not only right now are they using it by grabbing people off the street and throwing them into concentration like camps, like right here in Florida, Alligator, Alcatraz, which are inhumane conditions. Our own prisons are inhumane. Somebody that's been to prison, and it's something that is dear to my heart, prison reform, that one day I want to deal with after we get a chance to save our democracy. But to see them put them into makeshift prisons, and these aren't even convicted criminals. I mean, these are people that are getting dragged off the street, no due process, and thrown in there in a mixture of, yes, some are criminals, some are, people waiting for their people, some are people here on vacation that are by accidentally at, get the wrong taco stand. But even worse, you got actual American citizens now being dragged off the street while their wife is standing there, mothers are crying, screaming, "My son, my husband, he's an American citizen, what you're doing." And you got these people in masks with no badges coming up to them and saying, "Google me," and being nasty, grabbing him, taking him off. And some of them are lucky enough to get back in 3 days. Some of them are, end up in El Salvador or elsewhere. Just look at what happened with Abreu Garcia, which actually today a judge right now, right before we went on, basically said that now he could go and he could be let out on home arrest and not be deported.
Oh, is that
And
right? I did not know that.
absolutely, literally just broke a couple of minutes
Wow.
as we went out. And then another judge said that the ICE cannot pick him up, that he could stay here until the court. So it's a huge blow to Trump
Yeah.
because they could not prove that he was an ICE, that he was an MS-13. What's it called?
Enemy of the
Gang
state,
member.
kind of,
Gang
like a
member. I
terrorist.
mean, yeah, I mean, the simple thing. I mean, Donald Trump. Just think about the whole thing. They said is that he had MS-13 on his knuckles. Well,
Right.
the guy's here. The guy's here. Look at his knuckles. He doesn't have MS. What happened to his knuckles? Well, they erased him on the way there. So the lies, the concept, it's catching up. But what's even more dangerous, which I talk about, and I think it's important for all of your viewers to know, and I say, keep your eye on the ball. In my Substack, it's keep your eye on the ball because lots of moving parts. It's called election reform. What's part of Project 2025. It's what Donald Trump is pushing through, the real brains behind him, like Stephen Miller and Russell Vought. They're putting in through, it's called election reform. They're going to use ICE to go out there like Nazi Gestapos to add, election balloting. So people are scared to come in and ballot. They're going to start, doing away with early voting, mail-in voting. They're trying to reconstruct the actual in the Texas, Florida, and other places to pick up more seats as the way to reconstruct the map, the election map. They're also one of the reasons right now that he doesn't want to get rid of Pam Bondi or Kash Patel is because they're part of the plan to redo all of the DOJ rules and regulations of how to prosecute and go after, election fraud and who is election fraud. They're installing loyalists and taking out people that were bipartisan, putting loyalists into election monitoring stations. So all of these little things that they're putting in place and doing all of this is to be able to. One part is for Trump to stay in office and hold power because he understands that right now 2026 is going to be what's on the line because if he wins, he stays in office for decades to come. I mean, him and his Gestapo way of running things. If we win and they're able to take back the House and possibly take back the Senate, and then we have a chance to save our democracy because there's already a lot of damage that's been done and we're going to have to live through, and our kids are going to have to live through. But the quicker we could stop it, the quicker we could get back the reins, the quicker we could start getting back to normalcy. Because I mean, there's not enough time in one show, one podcast for us to discuss or talk about all the craziness that he's doing because we're just touching on little, the most important things when it comes to our constitution here at home. But the things he's doing around the world, the wars, the fake peace deals, the volcanoes that are erupting and burbling all over the place, it's just so scary to think about what the time we live in.
Yeah, my lips can't keep up with all the thoughts in my head to react to everything that you just laid out. But I'll start with this, going back to the perspective. We both know what happens in authoritarian regimes, and it's insane. We're about the same age to look at our nation as this is where we are, right? Ironically, Trump, as a distraction, and I haven't even had a chance to go into him, and released the MLK files, which I'd love to know a lot about, but it's certainly not the Epstein files. But before I set that up and we go into that, I want to respond kind of in the context of what I learned from Russia with Lev, and then kind of how it, filters into to now specifically. The shocking scenario that, well, let me put it this way. Some of my favorite media, television, films that have inspired me for my whole life, begin with Scorsese, right? All things Goodfellas and the kind
Love
of,
it.
yeah.
Love it.
And I love The Sopranos, for example. And when I watched you in From Russia with Lev, I mean, you were involved with some tricky business, from a young age, and to the point where you were carrying around a lot of stacks in the back of a car. They got, I think it was a Cadillac that got hit by.
Lincoln Tonka. Lincoln
Yeah,
Tonka.
and that really stood out to me how you were able to keep your cool under that, under those. It was like you got your cherry picked. That's what Scorsese would frame it as, right? So you've grown up in this thing. You've got this wonderful sort of sensibility, but you make your way into sort of the annals of power after the 2008 great financial crisis, of which I know a lot about. And I know a lot about the economic meltdown. And you had mentioned that you had yourself had experienced some downturns of that. But all of that considered, you end up getting a pipeline into this sort of conversation at Mar-a-Lago with Trump that leads to everything that would come to be. Can you kind of just set the table in your mind, responding to kind of how I teed that up? I mean, they described you as hustler, right? That was your title. Hustler. And I thought that was, wow, that's pretty interesting. But a guy who could certainly read the room, let's put it that way. Can you kind of carry me through your
they call me hustler because there's a part in the movie where he asked me, he's like, "What about you and Donald Trump?" I said, related, and I said, "You know what? We were both New York hustlers, and we could relate." And because he just on different levels, just he might have had a lot more money than me, but the hustle was the same. It's the New York hustle. It's interesting that you brought up some of that. I mean, you probably know a lot of the people, you probably investigated or researched a lot of the people that I knew personally, like Michael Francesi and Murad Balagula and all of these people with the gasoline tax scam and all of this stuff. This is my uncle. Some of these people were literally my family members. Some of them I called them my uncle, like, and and stuff like that, because of that's how you called your Italian uncles back then. And so I lived through that life at an early age. My father passed away when I was 11 years old, so I kind of grew up in that world, and that progressed into me going overseas to, the I mean, the Soviet Union, and being there during the collapse, being there when Russia, and knowing a lot of these today, what you call oligarchs today, of these people that are on Putin's top 10 list. I probably know five of them personally over many, many years, through my associations. And then, yeah, the downfall, 2008, me getting involved in, the poker games, and going to California, meeting my wife, getting involved in being producer in movies and stuff like that. I mean, I've done it all. And there was that one, but one thing I was never involved with, that, there was a saying that we would speak about back in the streets in Brooklyn, is that politics was worse than being a mobster. It was the most nastiest. Like, politicians, they had no backbone, they had no loyalty, and it was a game you never got involved with. So it was something I never was involved. I never voted. I never politics was. I stayed away. It was not my. It was a good old boys club that I did not belong in, like my wife told me back then. And then one day, again, it was because I didn't care about politics. I was doing about my hustle. I was involved in this real estate project, and I was approached by this billionaire, Robert Pereira. He was a big GOP donor at the time. He just built his house. It was called La Palace, $165 million mansion on the ocean in Boca Raton. And he wanted to throw a fundraiser for Donald Trump. And it was right a month before the election in 2000, and it was October 2015, right when the tape came out, the Billy Bush tape, the Access Hollywood, about
To
him
grab them
saying
by
that,
the
you know what exactly, what women's parts. And he was down like 30%. It was a horrible time, and we ended up throwing the party anyway, fundraiser. We raised him a little over $2 million, and there was about 20 people that were at that event, 10 couples, and Trump showed up with Giuliani, Ballard, the whole entourage. And we were warned that it was going to be, he's not in a good mood because of the polls. It's going to be a quick, like, 30, 40 minutes, picture line, the how you doing, and then he's off. He has a rally tomorrow in Doral. And that's what we were expecting. But what happened was something different. That's what changed, I think, the course of, history that we are today. Because that night, Donald Trump, something happened between me and him where, after the picture line, he ended up saying, "You know what? I'm going to stay," because I reminded him at the picture line about my the last conversation with him, where I introduced him to my son Aaron, and I told him about me working for his father, Fred Trump. And we got into some kind of nostalgic conversation about New York. And he said to one of his aides, "Let me stay for dinner for like 15 minutes," because he wasn't going to stay for dinner. And then the dinner actually lasted an hour and a half. He stayed, and it was like a small table of 20 people, and the Q&A started. And it was interesting to watch, of all these rich, powerful people that were basically couldn't open their mouth. They were like embarrassed, couldn't talk. They were overwhelmed by Donald Trump, not only because Trump is a powerful, figure to begin with. He was rich. He was Donald Trump. He was very overwhelming. But now he running for the president of the United States. But like I said, we were both hustlers. We could relate, and I just started talking to him, and we spoke for about an hour. While everybody, like, there was nobody else in the room, just going back, talking like two guys on the street of Brooklyn. And like I said in the movie, I was mesmerized, I was Trumpanized, I was Coltonized. And from that day, literally, I was with him every day. From, we went to like rallies, to I flew with him to Vegas when he did the third debate with Clinton, when he followed her on stage. I was with him at the Hilton in New York when he won officially. And it was kind of, from that day on, now I'm here.
pretty amazing what you opened up with earlier. That he says what, like, when you got out of prison, I don't know the guy, I never saw him, never did anything. I don't have any idea. I mean, it's like, because when I see that, I'm reminded. I picture him as the Mad Magazine Mad King. You know what I mean? Like some, like, character from The Emperor's New Clothes, and I see that picture in my mind.
I mean, just think about what he did. There was times when he would say that he didn't know if Rudy Giuliani was still his lawyer or not. Ambassador Sutherland, they gave him $1 million. I'll never forget. He gave him $1 million the day before. He was on TV talking about how great Sutherland is, the ambassador to the UN, right before the Ukraine scandal, and how he's talking about such a great guy. You know, we have such a great relationship. And then 2 hours later, breaking news. Ambassador Sutherland confirms that Trump had a conversation with Zelensky. Literally 4 hours later, they're asking him, Trump, like, what's your relationship? He goes, who? I don't know the guy. I don't even know where he came, where he came from. He could have been a coffee boy.
It's incredible. Well, and I was struck, as the documentary, again, to remind the viewers, From Russia with Lev, which is a Rachel Maddow production, and I encourage everybody to see it who hasn't. It's really incredible because it sets the table what we need to get into by way of what the DOJ can do, has done, and is doing. But I was dumbstruck, and here's a sidebar that I think you'll find fascinating. When I first started my work, I was working with a well-known journalist at the New York Times who writes for the Atlantic and New Yorker and yada yada yada. And he recommends, because I was going down this path of trying to understand RICO and all things racketeering, right? And he's like, look, you might want to give Rudy Giuliani a call. And so I give a call because he's the godfather of RICO when he was at his zenith, as the DA in Manhattan in the 70s, of course, and all things, the five families, right? But, when I called Rudy initially to kind of pick his brain and talk, it was probably about 5 minutes into the conversation, because I had a entree by someone he's known for decades and that sort of thing, and he just says to me, "How much money you got?"
That's really.
And I always thought I'd love to see that reaction, because I think about that scene in that movie with boy, what is his name, Sacha Baron Cohen, when he got him set up on the couch. That you must have died if you saw that film, and you must,
Oh,
because I know he's
I,
like a father figure to you, right? Rudolph.
me and Rudy went through a lot. I went from so many mixed emotions because you gotta understand, I grew up in New York, just like what you're investigating. Most of he put a lot of people that I know, he put them in prison. He destroyed a lot of lives and a lot of families, the way I grew up concerned. But at the same time, I grew up with a certain respect for him because, he still was the mayor. He still, cleaned up the city, 9/11, he was American. So there was, these mixed emotions. And here I was now. He was the president's like right hand. He's the president's lawyer, and here I am now in that circle. Not only am I close to the president himself, but when Trump became president, it wasn't like I was hanging out with him every day because now he's president of the United States. So it's like, I see him at events, and then at events you see him for 5 minutes. It's not like, we had no business going on. It was more of like, being one of the inner circle donor, and now I'm also close to Rudy, where Rudy is at the White House every day, and now he's part of the Mueller report, and now I'm part of the Mueller team, getting involved in shit that, being a fly on the wall that you can't even imagine. And now I'm being approached by, here we are with the invasion of Venezuela. We're going to overthrow Maduro, and I mean all kinds of shit. I'm saying to you. So, but for Rudy himself, it was interesting where I really, it was incredible for me why we became so close is because I grew up, like it or not, I grew up a mobster. I mean, I grew up in that mob mentality. I grew up watching The Godfather. That was like my Bible. I grew up without a father. Some of the people that I looked up to that were like my father figures were some of the most powerful gangsters, mobsters, in the country. And I don't say it because I'm proud of it, but that's just what it was.
Right.
And it took me time to evolve over time to be able to realize and actually use that to my advantage to be a better person, a better father. Because the good part is I wasn't born, I was not that person. I was part of that life, but I was never like, I would never hurt somebody intentionally. I was always like the good angel on my uncle's side. You know what I'm saying? I'd be the guy that wouldn't go running to my uncle telling him that somebody just stole $10,000 because I know the repercussions. I would just eat it. I was the other type and that's what I think was my savior and benefit of not going to jail, not being because I had a lot of power at a very young age, as you could see from just the people that I knew that I could have, been involved with. But I always looked, try. My old dreams were always to do charity work, to help kids out and make a lot of money, and then just retire and do charity and stuff like that. So I had other kinds of, but that was the world I grew up in, and those were the people that I knew. So when my world collided with Rudy, it was incredible to see that we had so much in common, because at first, nobody could understand what would me and Rudy have in common. I mean, he's hardcore politician, hardcore prosecutor. I grew up around all criminals, never in politics, and me and him like this because he had a fascination for the mob. He loved the mob. He admired mobsters. Like, we would sit there and talk about The Godfather. See, I knew The Godfather not only because I loved the movie, and it was part of growing up in my culture, but also when I used to go over. A lot of people don't know this, but when I used to go overseas when I was young, 19, to Russia, to the Soviet Union, and I was the intermediary between the mobsters in Russia and the mobsters here in the United States, and I was the middleman, the translator, the kid that went and gave the messages. The Russian mob was built off of the movies, off of the Italian mob, and they would watch The Godfather, Gangster Chronicle, Bugsy, all of these mobsters, good Once Upon a Time in America, and they would. This is what they would be building their loyalty, because they didn't have like the structure the Italian mob. Russian were all gangs of different cultures, different, what's it called, but the major hierarchy started building their own, from the Italian, from The Godfather, and I was taught to memorize it because I would translate it to them over there, because I was like that young kid, 19, 20-year old, that, they were like my grandfathers and uncles, and I would be in the room and trusted to be able to sit there, listen, and then translate this movie to them. And
Well, it's an incredible sort of revelation there, Lev, because on my work, I've discovered a lot of incredible revelations. One of which is known as Gresham's dynamic, and what it basically symbolizes is just the nature of how people can read the room, right? So let's just say, like you described, right? You're coming out of this real estate deal. You're working with a big guy. You guys raised some money for Trump. He recognizes that you're kind of a guy he can mix it up with, and the next thing you know, you're on this path where, because of your background, it doesn't seem like at all he had any sort of history on that, like he got a dossier or anything like that. It just, he could read the room. He read you. You guys read each other. You recognized certain things, and you were then on this monumental like pathway. And when you describe that, I wanted to insert this question too, because I mean, I know that my specialty is pretty much financial fraud and Wall Street. And so you grew up in the arena and you know how things go. But one of the biggest lingering questions I've had forever, and I'm curious, it might sound like a little bit far afield from where we're talking, but I wonder if you've ever kind of
I know Jordan Belfort, Wolf of Wall Street. I worked for that was my whole era, my whole life. Go
well, there
ahead,
you
but
go.
go
In the boiler
ahead.
rooms and all the rest of it. Now, it all makes incredible sense, right? But so a big thing that I think, and this is just me speculating, might have had a big impact on Putin was in 1998, the run on the ruble, because of what was a huge outfit called Long Term Capital Management that ran derivatives and basically collapsed the Russian ruble. I always kind of was curious if, because it just seems like Putin is one of these guys, and you mentioned it in the movie, that operates in such a chess, multi-dimensional chess, that he's always 10 steps ahead in the manipulation game, because the ruble got pounded by Wall Street deregulation in the derivatives market. Do you have any knowledge or any introspection based on Putin playing the long game for revenge?
Well, it wasn't so much revenge, because Putin was part of that game also. See, a lot of people don't, because it was a benefit. Because Putin, if you look at history, Putin comes into power and takes over in '99. This
Absolutely.
happened.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
a year afterwards.
Right.
But he was always groomed to it because he went from
KGB.
KGB, then he became the mayor of St. Petersburg, and then they pushed him through the party, and eventually brought him out there. The reason why they also needed the destabilization of the ruble is because a lot of money was buried. You had a lot of money out there, rubles that people would bury and have, and what they needed to clean it up. They needed to take control over and build the oligarchy and the way Putin wanted to, and make sure who had the money. Because what by destabilizing, what did they do? They opened up new currency. Remember, they issued new
Yes.
currency, and they made it you had to come in and give in your old rubles to exchange it to get the new currency. Well, if you were stealing money your whole life and you had all this, you were living good, you had all of this millions of rubles because of you've been stealing since the communism, which all Russia. Now you were like screwed, because if you came in and with all this money, they'd say, "Where'd you get it?" So the
Right.
only money you could really change it was money that was legalized in the bank. So a
Right.
lot of money got destroyed. A lot of that wealth, a lot of power, a lot of people that had basically it was a way to do a cleansing before he came into power, to then start initializing his oligarchy and
Right,
spider
which
web that
then
he
leads to
shifted.
extraction, right? And then a lot of laundering into the Western
Correct.
world, including, of course, Trump Tower,
Well,
right?
that was the beginning. Trump Tower was the easy part because he played ball. Because not only Trump, but also Trump's players like Steve Witkoff, he was in the game. That he was right now in charge of negotiations between the special envoy to the Middle East, the special envoy to Russia, speaking to Putin. I mean, being Trump's lawyer, being a billionaire real estate developer, partners with Len Blavatnik. You know what I'm saying to you? I could go on and on and on with the connections and connected dots. We'll be here forever. But that was the key. That's what showed Trump the power, because Trump went, see, in the 70s and 80s, because of his relationship to Roy Cohen
Yeah.
and the mob, and the way he had to deal with the mob to be able to do his casinos, buildings, everything was connected.
Concrete in
Uh,
Manhattan.
Everything, windows, concrete, everything was unions. He had to deal with the guys, Sammy the Bull Gravano, and so on. Fat Tony Salerno, which was, I used to date his illegitimate daughter. We have a lot of, yeah. So, he, Trump graduated in the 90s to wanting, this is where his transition, and I write about it in my Substack, is where his transition to become from a mob boss and a godfather to wanting to be a dictator, to wanting to be, watching that power and real money. Because before he saw the power of the mob, it was isolated towards really New York and New Jersey. Because Trump, nobody really knew who Trump was until The Apprentice, who Trump was in California. I mean, besides New York, New Jersey, nobody knew who Trump was. Then The Apprentice came about, he became an American, more what's it called. But even in Europe, Trump was never considered a money guy. Nobody really knew. He was always pissed off at the Europe because of Davos, because he would never get invited there because he never really had the money. He'd be one of those guys that, if he had $1 million, he'd pretend he had $1 billion. You know what I'm saying to you? So yes, he was wealthy. He had a wealthy life, but he was never wealthy enough to be in the crowd that he wanted to be considered wealthy. He always chased it until now, until he became the president now. Because now
The
through
back
his
door.
now through cryptocurrency, through the, I mean, he's made more. They've made more money in the past 6 months. The past 6 months, they've made more money through cryptocurrency, real estate deals, getting presents. I mean, in the open. I mean, in the open, not even hiding it, what's it called, than they've ever made. So now, yes, now he is officially worth billions and billions of dollars. But prior to that, it was all paper. So, yeah, so in the 90s, he opened up the floodgates. They came in because what a lot of Americans are used to is like, you go buy an apartment, you do your research, you go look, you talk, you bargain. When the Russians came to buy an apartment, they came into Trump Tower and said, "We'll buy 20 of them." We'll pay you 20% above what your what's it called, because we're going to pay you cash, or because we're going to wire it from Luxembourg and it's going to be from this corporation, but really you're going to put the name on the title on this corporation, and we're going to pay 30% more, and we're going to buy 30 of them, and then I'm going to bring you my friend, he wants another 30 of them. This is how they bought, and the market exploded. That's why
and
all of a
Saudi
sudden,
and UAE and all of the other
yeah,
guys.
yeah.
And, and on top of that, to your point, and just a quick sidebar, because I want to hit 2 points and then move into now, because I could talk all day about your wonderful documentary. But, he was in the crosshairs with Letitia James, civil settlements based on all of his control fraud apparatus and the appraisal fraud with Trump Tower, and he was in for about 450 million, right, on the civil litigation side prior to the election. And then, of course, the big money comes in from Elon. The big money comes in from all of these different places. Now that's an afterthought, right? He was about to go through his seventh, you know, uh,
Well, think about it. Just that's a great point. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Patrick, but that's a great point you made. Think about it. When right before he became president, he got hit with the 450. He couldn't even go get a bond for it because he was not liquid enough, and when they would evaluate where he was and what his properties were worth, he couldn't even get 400 million. And this is the billionaire he was pretending to be. Now he'll pay that off. He don't need anybody, no problem. But that's a great example of what you just said.
Well, but the
And this
other
is
side of
literally,
that, yeah, but the other side of that's really fascinating, Lev, and this is where my work comes in, and hopefully we can talk about that, as we develop a friendship. But Letitia James said the buck stopped at him defrauding Deutsche Bank. It's ridiculous. Deutsche Bank was in on it the whole time
of course,
because
of
Putin
course.
was throwing money into Deutsche
They
Bank.
could, that's a lot of things. What people don't understand is the way Putin was able to control not only Deutsche Bank, but lots of own institutions and also a lot of major uh, parts of not just in the United States, but in the world of historical properties and also important infrastructural things like, coal mines and, steel plants and,
Aluminum.
aluminum all over the world. And this is where the oligarchy, this is what Putin's plan. See, what people don't know is when the breakdown of Russia happened, the one, from 1991 till about 2000, it went, they took everything. It was robbed. So what Putin came in, he basically said he kept what they had, which was oil. Oil was a big thing, and they basically kept their money and made his billionaires. And he said, "This is what you guys are going to go out to. You're going to go spread the wealth, and you're going to buy up whatever we can, and all of these from London to America to Australia, Japan. I mean, if you take a look at Russian investments, oligarchy investments, and strategically, that is why that is where the real war is. And that's why they're able to be so powerful because what people don't understand is they say, oh, Russia infiltrated the United States by election. They have no clue how Russia is infiltrated the United States. Forget about Trump and that we have guys sitting in the White House that are actually vetting people for jobs that are Russian assets that literally work for Russia that are what we're not even going to talk about that. But the way our system is set up through the super PACs and the way because of Russians are so creative with the way they launder and through third world countries, eventually by the time the money gets here, it's so clean because you have lawyers, you have politicians, ex-politicians, lobbyists that are willing to look the other way, help you structure it
That's
and
right.
teach you how to structure it properly
Yep.
so that when you need something done and when you need Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene or somebody to go out there and start spewing that Russian propaganda, what do? You start donating to her campaign.
That's right.
And then you send somebody in and sit down and have lunch with her and say, you know what, here's a check for $250,000. But you know what? We really disagree with what these dirty Democrats are doing about this. And all of a sudden, you do that with her, you do it with him, you do it with another 10 people,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden you have your vote. You buy your votes. I
Amen.
mean,
And
it's
and
it's,
that's
it's
part of
simple
it.
as that.
That's a part of the umbrella corruption, especially through Citizens United. But there's even more, as you spec. As
More. Wait, I'm just giving you like bits. I mean, we
Of
could sit
course, and
here
I want to know
and
so much more. Trust me. And just interestingly, I worked with a woman who was a reporter for the New York Times, a woman by the name of Louise Story, who did this fabulous long form expose about money laundering in Manhattan. It was basically all of that story that you're talking about. She, of course, disappears from the New York Times about 6 months later. I mean, this is how, and that was like 6 years ago, right? So Louise Story was her name. So I could talk forever about from Russia with Lev, and I will recommend to everybody, you've got to see this. And I want to make one comment on about it, because really what it's about is you went to prison for 10 months, obviously involved with all of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, by way of what you got, I think, nailed on based on the fraud.
I was arrested for, this is the interesting part. They arrested me for espionage.
Espionage. Yeah, and
But
I think
then,
I got rid of that now, right?
they dropped all those charges
Yeah.
because that's what they needed, that to be able to make the hoopla and to shut me up. And then they basically charged me with a 12-year-old wire fraud charge. For a business that I was involved with five of my partners that we invested $1 million in. So that's what, because wire fraud is the easiest charge to get a conviction.
Right.
And then they charged me with a technical election fraud violation. And then they charged me with lying to authorities. So now let me break it down. So the wire fraud charge was a company that 12 years ago, me and my friends, five of us, put money invested in, and it was $1 million that didn't work out. The FBI and DOJ came to each and one of them, found them, and threatened them that they were going to look into them if they don't turn state's evidence against me and say that I lied to them and defrauded them to get that charge, because they needed to stick. Otherwise, I would have beat all the charges. The other charge, as far as my election fraud charge, it was Pete Sessions, Congressman Sessions, Republican. I never donated in my life. I listened to what they would tell me, their people, how to donate, and they told us we could donate $2,500 a piece maximum. So I donated on my credit card $2,500. My partner Igor did $2,500 on his credit card. Well, what we didn't know, and we didn't understand that that's breaking the rule, was that both of the cards were under our corporate. We had a corporate account. So basically, we broke the law because it was we didn't pay back the company when we got arrested. Because I didn't even know that, that it was time that the 2,500. And lying was because when they asked us if we did that, obviously I didn't know that I did that, and I said no, I did not we did not give more than we were supposed to, and that was a lie. So these are the type of things that I ended up getting convicted on, and the beauty of the judge wanted to, and I mean they wanted to put me away for 20 years for this. I went to trial. And even after the jury found me guilty, because of the way the Southern District of New York has a 96% conviction rate, the judge, thank God, because that was saw through the nonsense, and that's why he sentenced me only to 20 months and not 12 or 14 years that they wanted to give me, and I ended up serving 4 months in Otisville and another 10 months on house arrest and what's it called? But yeah.
Well, that's interesting. It was Otisville. I didn't realize that, because that's where Michael Cohen was as well, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, I know Michael going back 30 years. I know
Gotcha.
Michael before Trump. I know Michael, you guys for Michael's I know more about Michael than Michael's uncle, Maury Levine, used to own the El Carib. The El Carib, which is I don't, you know what the El Carib, it was the catering hall for all five families, Murat Balagula's original office. So Maury Levine was like an uncle to me, and he was Michael's real uncle. So we have a lot of intertwine. Plus, me and Michael ran in the same circles. He was a little older than me, ran the same circle. But then Michael went to, he was a lawyer. I was, and he went to a different, I was not a lawyer. I was a street kid, and
Right.
that's where we separated. But then when Trump ran for office, we reunited actually in Washington D.C. We start our paths crossed, and then obviously now we are on the same team to talk about speaking truth to power, as he talks about his interactions and I talk about mine.
I love watching you guys together. It's amazing. Just two final thoughts on your documentary, and then I want to turn it, even though we're running out of time. And if we go a little over, we can cut whenever you decide to. But I do want to bring it full circle, because there's so much impactful stuff.
And we could definitely do a part two, come back, because I not so if you don't want to rush, because I only have like about 9 minutes left. So
Okay,
just
so
to
let's
give
do
you a
9 minutes and we'll call it good on that. And then we'll tee up and tease. And thank you for that opportunity. But just two comments on the doc. One, I found your wife so incredibly animated,
Thank you.
and
Thank
she's
you.
so fun to watch. And you know, and I hope I just there was a levity about her response to watching this stuff from the sidelines that I thought was quite amazing. And then the other part of it was your well, maybe I call it a mea culpa, but with Hunter Biden was so incredibly touching. Can you tell me, you know, maybe those two facets of that film and what they mean to you?
Well, first of all, my wife is my everything. If, you know, if it wasn't for her and her support and my kids' support and my sister's support, my family was what got me out of the cult and stood besides me because, you know, I didn't even realize what I was putting them through and to stand by my side, stand through me, you know, the arrest, wait, you know, and then, you know, till now going through all of it. I mean, not much I could say except for she's my everything. And you saw in the movie, you saw how she saw it playing out because it was interesting because I didn't know what she was saying when they were filming her. I wasn't there. I had no idea. It was for me. It was interesting to watch her perception of how, and even you know, I shed several tears watching that
I bet.
myself, and that because knowing what the way she was looking at it and remembering what she would be saying to me, like what are you doing? Like, you know, this is a good old boys club. You don't belong in there. Like, because, you know, she'd watch me come in there because, you know, these are guys that want to smoke cigars and have a whiskey, and I want to smoke a joint and go watch the, you know, the basketball game or something like that. So it's like we're different worlds. You know, they walk around suit and tie. I have a gold chain and a T-shirt. You know, it was amazing to watch how she saw it play out that the way you know she would say like I couldn't believe you'd walk in there and they would kiss your ass like they would. We'd walk into the Trump in Washington DC, and it would be like you know they'd be running around. You see all these congressmen. I mean, Kevin McCarthy would run around, oh Lev, how are you? You know, and you see Lindsey Graham running around like, hey Lev, did you see Donald today? Did you see the president? And then you see this one. I mean, and it would be like, you know, hey, did you tell Rudy this? And oh, but you know, it was like so surreal. But going through it, you didn't realize it, and then watching it and watching the way my wife saw it interact, not only from that, but also from the bad side, the scary stuff. You know, like those times when I was in Ukraine, not knowing if I'm even going to make it out alive, and you know, and having her not knowing what I was putting my family through, because you know, here I am calling her saying, "All right, I don't know if I'm going to make it," hanging up, and she's sitting back watching the news break. I'm somewhere in a foreign country. She knows that I don't know, and here you got so it was a lot of mixed emotions, and you know, but she's my everything, and what can I say? So you know,
I can
definitely
understand why. She seems like a remarkable person and the mother of your children to be able to survive what you guys have gone through and come out the other side smiling is something else. But Hunter Biden was that must
Yeah, Hunter was different. Hunter, it was somebody. See, Hunter was somebody we destroyed. Hunter was somebody I was a part of aggressively when I was part of the cult. When I was on my mission to go dig up dirt on him, I stopped looking at Hunter Biden as a human being. I stopped looking at Hunter Biden as an individual. Hunter Biden became an object. Hunter Biden became just a tool, a use of way of being able to get objective to where we needed to get, and that was to keep Trump in office and get destroy the Bidens. And that's how I looked at Hunter Biden until I snapped out of this whole thing. And when I snapped out of it, I started get part of my even my 12-step program in Gamblers Anonymous. Part of my that is to make a right on all my wrongs is one of my steps, and that was part of my kind of not rehabilitation, but a part of my getting back into doing making right for what I did wrong. And Hunter was one of the things that I've always wanted to one day meet and talk and maybe talk to him. But as time evolved and as I started speaking truth to power and fighting and seeing how hard they were pressing and watching the dirt that they started coming out with on Hunter and the laptop, because I was a lotly involved in that laptop, knowing a lot of stuff, knowing a lot of it was lies, knowing a lot of it was manipulating, watching them do it, and started realizing, because I'm a father. I have 7 kids. four boys, and and knowing that if somebody would did that to my son to hurt me, because I knew the truth that Hunter was, yes, he had a problem. Yes, Hunter might not be the most perfect son or perfect individual, but I knew that Hunter was a tool. Hunter was not some mastermind criminal that was using the White House to go out there and manipulate like we were trying to port him out. Hunter was being used by assets like the Russian FSB, like Ukrainian oligarchs, and like assets here like the Steve Bannons and the mega world to achieve what they want. So he was being torn in all these parts. So as that time evolved, and as the more I was speaking up, Hunter became more of an obsession to me, that I wanted to do right by him, and not even knowing him, not caring, if he's good or bad, but doing right by him by trying to clear his name in one way or another. And that was part of also me writing my book, Shadow Diplomacy, because when I wrote it, I didn't know if I was going to ever testify in Congress, if the movie would come out, because I knew they tried to shut me up and to get the truth out. So I wrote Shadow Diplomacy to try to be able to explain what we did to Hunter and to his father, just as a father, as a human being. And then one day I got a call from somebody, which I'm going to leave the story a little bit vague, because me and Hunter, I promised him that he's coming back now. We're going to do an interview together and tell the story. But I got a call from somebody that asked me if I would be willing to help and tell the truth to Hunter's legal team. And I said, absolutely. And basically, for the past year and a half of Joe Biden's presidency, you could say I was as close to the Bidens and Hunter as I was with Trump prior to that, maybe even closer.
Well, there is so much more to discuss, and I will take you up on, let's say, episode 2 of this. But just to tease it, I mean, look, there's Epstein. There's the stuff coming down the pike right now with the lie, deny, switch the blame, and implicate as it relates to all things RussiaGate, right? And we're going to see that.
Yes.
And I got questions. I don't know if you have answers about Matt Taibbi, by the way, and then more. Obviously, you're a Rosetta Stone, a vault of incredible information. I'm so pleased to discuss this with you and to make your acquaintance. I look forward to getting to know you more. And to everybody else, please check out our work at thecon.tv, of course, thenewuntouchables.com, as well as thecleannewdeal.org. And I'll shoot you a text, Lev. And
Absolutely, Patrick. Absolutely. I appreciate you having me on. Lots to talk about. Send me and let's talk, because I think there's a lot of information that my goal in life is to get this information out and make sure to be able to get our democracy back. And so we, because we are in some dark times, but we do have hope.
like you said at the beginning, you have so much confidence, and you can wear that smile because you have the truth. I like to say, when you have the truth, you're bulletproof. So, my friend, I look forward to talking to you in the future. All the best to you and your family. And until
Thank you,
next
brother.
time, all the best. Take care.
Thank you. Take care, brother.